This is certainly a deck that was on Sam Black's radar as he designed the Mystic Sultai strategy.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm sure he identified early that counterspells were a great way to fight this archetype. You know, this Urza Outcome deck has been dominant on Magic Online for the last 3 weeks or so.
See, turn 1 snow-covered island Arkham's Astrolabe for both players. Pretty common turn 1 in the modern format these days.
I don't mind it so much in the non-artifact decks. I think enabling 3 and 4 color decks without having a really painful mana base is pretty sweet, as well as just kind of incentivizing players to play basic lands. However, when it becomes like part of the artifact strategy, that's the part that I'm not really so happy about.
Yeah, the 1 mana artifact that replaces itself. Pretty powerful stuff. For black, we have Polluted Delta, which will be fetching on Burchett's end step to 19. Burchett has second Astrolabe, tapped Hallowed Fountain.
Is it Prophetic Prism, the one that costs 2, that effectively does the same thing as Arkham's Astrolabe but doesn't require snow mana?
Yep.
I know way back in the day it used to be used in various Jund sideboards to get around Spreading Seas.
Oh, yeah. It was a different time.
Yeah, I mean, that was also a standard format. But
You're right. Sunken Hollow fetched up for black. Part of this Field of the Dead, a spread of different land names package in his deck.
Yeah, Field of the Dead is a nice singleton, and the deck for Sam Black is a way to close the game without actually having to play much of anything. You know, his deck does draw go quite well, and the one of Field of the Dead has already won him a couple games so far this weekend that we've seen.
Scalding Tarn go for black. Burchett will attempt Saheeli Sublime Artificer. That is met by Deprive. Black will have to pick up that snow-covered island as a cost for the counterspell.
Yeah, not the best use of Deprive there because Sam does have a handful of cryptic commands right now, but Deprive, shutting down the Saheeli was his only option, and shutting it down he needed to do.
The Deprive plays really well with the Mystic Sanctuaries, but sometimes you do wish it was Mana Leak.
Yeah, for sure. The Mystic Sanctuary is obviously a powerful card in Sam's deck, and his deck's pretty much built around it. But Deprive is normally a counterspell you see out of decks that can function on low land drop counts like Delver of Secret decks.
Burchett is going to start their turn with the Mishra's Bauble trick. Checks the top card of their library.
It's
doesn't
bad.
like it. Fetches away with Misty Rainforest. Burchett to 19, and here is Urza Lord High Artificer. Well, big check for another counterspell for black.
Yeah, and unfortunately, stuff like Drown in the Lock here does not counter because there are only 3 cards in Autumn's graveyard. So Sam does have another Deprive. He might need a spot removal spell here to get the job done.
Thought Scour Drown in the Lock could be it.
Yeah, Thought Scour targeting the opponent is something we've seen a little bit here over the last few weeks. Thanks to the Into the Story Drown in the Lock decks, because milling your opponent helps turn on those cards.
We see black cracking Scalding Tarn here. Going to 18 off of the fetch. This is with the Urza on the stack. Possibly with the token on the stack. I believe I scouted a Fatal Push in the hand. That's where we're at. The construct making trigger is on the stack. So before that shows up, you see Fatal Push targeting the Urza, the fetch land turning on Revolt.
Yeah, now Autumn did have the option to actually float 2 mana off of the Astrolabes, but instead chose not to.
And just to pass to the turn, a draw for the Bauble. And here is land number 4 for black. It is untapped Mystic Sanctuary. Puts Deprive on top of the library.
If I'm not mistaken, Sam actually has Cryptic Command in hand too, so as long as he can handle the Construct token from Autumn, it's going to be really hard to fight through this wall of counter magic. Because without Urza, the deck doesn't really do a whole lot of explosive things.
Mox Opal for Burchett. Land number 5 is Snow-Covered Island. A tap of 6 mana. Everflowing Chalice, kicked 3 times.
This is a pretty good way to get out from underneath a counterspell lock. This is going to help Autumn be able to play multiple spells in a single turn.
Counter bounce.
Yeah.
Get rid of that token, get rid of that Chalice.
That was a smart play from Sam. The counter on the Chalice means that Autumn's going to be basically relegated to only playing 1 spell a turn or 1 important spell a turn. And bouncing the token means that Sam is no longer under any real pressure. Now with the Deprive back in hand, can bounce that Mystic Sanctuary by countering the next spell.
No 5th land for black, so just a draw and a go. Burchett will do the same. Draw step for black was opt. Another just draw a go. I figure that draw go generally advantages Sam, though he will want to make some more land drops.
I mean, at some point, I expect Autumn to do an end-of-turn paradoxical outcome to try to draw a bunch of cards, and this might be the turn to do it. So Sam has to basically figure out a way to hold up a counterspell for both his end step as well as Autumn's turn.
Autumn runs out 3, count them 3, engineered explosives on 0. Opt end step for black. Snow-covered forest will be his 5th land. Yeah, those explosives definitely indicative of what you're talking about.
Right, but the paradox outcome now can be countered by Drown in the Loch because there are 4 or more cards in Autumn's graveyard. So Sam may want to go ahead and use Drown in the Loch while it's a hard counter, but Deprive also just lets him get back Mystic Sanctuary as well.
So here is paradoxical outcome. That's going to be deprived. Black will pick up that Mystic Sanctuary.
Deprive aptly named here, depriving Autumn of any real chance of clawing back in this game. Just getting 1-for-1 out the door.
And with a lot of these cards, 3 explosives on 0, those are mulligans right now unless you can resolve the outcome. Here's another attempt, but that is drowned in the lock.
Yeah, and that was basically Autumn's big turn, big turn cycle, end of turn outcome, untap outcome, and Sam just having both of the 1-mana counterspells to get the job done.
There you see the Throne of Eldraine, big addition. Really one of the cards that made Black's deck possible. Terminate plus Counterspell hybrid card.
Yeah, that split card of Drown in the Loch is potent. And when you also start combining it with other reasons to Thought Scour your opponent, you get not only just a really powerful 2-mana spell, but also just a coherent strategy.
Sam with a near lock now. You see him playing the Sanctuary again, putting the Deprive back on top of the library. Burchett's last card last turn was Flooded Strand. That's going to go find Mystic Sanctuary, so they get to put Paradoxical Outcome on the top of their library. But you're going to need at least 2 spells to break through this wall in most situations.
Right. So here Burchett's going to put the outcome back on top, but that's the only card in their hand, and Sam's hand is just wrapped up with Cryptic Commands, and Autumn has to go for it right now because there's a Deprive on top from the Mystic Sanctuary. This is really the strength of Sam's deck, just the constant interaction with counterspells and Mystic Sanctuary, rebuying them over and over and over again, creates this soft lock.
Another attempt at an outcome, Cryptic Command for black, and now a second Mystic Sanctuary, putting the Cryptic right back on top after having drawn the Deprive. Yeah. Now Burchett has seen enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's so many outcomes were stripped, only a few Urzas left. And with Sam having the Cryptic Command still in hand, not really much Autumn can do there. And you're really seeing the kind of oppressive nature of Sam Black's counterspell package there, alongside Mystic Sanctuary, both Deprive and Cryptic Command, being able to rebuy it. Just locking your opponent out of the game, basically.
Well, he's really taking advantage of a weakness that a lot of decks don't of the outcome deck. We see so many engineered explosives cast for 0 because it synergizes very well, but it's high synergy, low power.
Right.
So your counterspells just get that much more effective in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen time and time again this weekend that the Urza decks really falter against counterspells. Even things like Remand that just slow them down are usually good enough to buy you turns, sometimes multiple turns, because if the deck doesn't stick Urza, it can't really do more than one meaningful thing in a single turn.
So players going to sideboards here for Sam Black. We have 2 Plague Engineer, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Oko Thief of Crowns, 2 Ceremonious Rejections, a Disdainful Stroke, a Force of Negation, a Weather the Storm, an Assassin's Trophy, and a Spell Snare.
So here, if you're Sam, I think you want more of the same. You kind of know all the ways you're going to be attacked from the opponent. Though, I do think that something like Monster Mentor could be relatively problematic. Though, luckily for Sam, the 4 Drown in the Locks can double up as a counterspell or removal spell if the Monster Mentor does end up sticking. I think you want the Assassin's Trophy as a catch-all. There's not a whole lot of hits for Spell Snare, so I'd leave that one on the sideline. Force Negation seems like it's pretty good as a way to just make sure that Autumn can't break through your wall of counterspells. Disdainful Stroke acts as another way to counter the Urza as well as the Paradox Outcome. The rest, Engineer Explodes on 0 can sometimes do some work, but that's about it. The Plague Engineer is kind of hit or miss because it does work against either Saheeli or Master Thopters, but unfortunately, one makes servos and one makes Thopters, so it doesn't stop both of them.
All right, for Autumn Burchett, we have 3 Path to Exile, 2 Monastery Mentor, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Okos of their own, a Weather the Storm, a Mystical Dispute, a Ceremonious Rejection, a Disdainful Stroke, a Stoic Rebuttal, and a Nature's Claim.
So if I'm Autumn, I need ways to fight through these counter spells, but you also want to limit the functionality of Sam's deck. I think Rest in Peace is secretly very good against Sam's strategy because it exiles your graveyard, so it turns off a whole lot of stuff, as well as turning off the Mystic Sanctuaries from Sam's deck. So the 2 Rest in Peace are home run. I think Monster Mentor and Oko just give you a little bit of threat diversity that's cheap. Maybe you can fit in some double spell turns that are relevant, and both those cards could pose problems for Sam's strategy. The Mystical Dispute is a 1-mana counterspell, kind of like a Dispel that helps you win a counter war. So I like that one. And then maybe the Stoic Rebuttal, but I would not worry about Disdainful Stroke. I hate bringing in Disdainful Stroke as a way to just interact with Cryptic Command. I think it's a losing battle.
All right, well, these 2 decks, relatively new to Modern. If you're looking for a great opportunity to try them out yourselves, check out SCG Regionals next weekend. We're going to tell you all about that right now.
Regional Championships return Saturday, October 19th. Each Modern event awards $5,000 and 8 qualifications for the Invitational at SCGCon Winter. The first 200 players to register at each location receive an exclusive playmat and matching token, while the first 100 also receive a second exclusive token. Register today at any of these 11 locations or visit go.starcitygames.com/regionals.
That is next weekend, Saturday, October 19th. Unfortunately, I will not be attending regionals. I got a trip planned to my old college town.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it should be.
Well, I will also not be attending regionals, unfortunately, because I live in California, the nearest one.
Why doesn't SCG come to the West Coast?
Right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm one of those guys.
Yeah,
now.
yeah, that's you.
Yeah, that's
you.
me. That's who I am as a person. Look, the moment I moved out there, I was just like, oh, I wonder if there's a regional somewhere in California. It's like, no, the nearest one's in frickin' Connecticut or something. I don't know. It's not very close.
Tell me you've never done a drive across the entire country for a tournament.
I have drove halfway across the country for a tournament.
Oh, yeah.
Drove from Virginia to Kansas City for an open.
I made some stops along the way, but my furthest drive, I drove back in one leg, Nashville to Minneapolis.
How far is that?
16 hours.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and BBD drove to an open from Virginia and Kansas City. That's as far as I got. It was about 12 to 14 hours.
That vacation was a little, so it was on the way, drove to Indianapolis. There was a GP that weekend. So
Yeah.
that drive's like 10 hours from Minneapolis. Stayed in Ohio for the week in between, which is not that far from Indiana, and then down to Tennessee for the GP the week after. Again, a short drive, but the drive back was very lengthy.
It's like both players here are about ready to go for game number 2.
Burchett on the play. It's going to be Serum Visions.
Serum Vision is not a card you see too much in these Urza Outcome decks, mostly because it's not an artifact, but because of the more combo-centric nature of the Urza Outcome deck with Paradox Outcome, it's a good way to kind of sculpt your early draws, make sure you can hit your land drops. And though most players have moved away from it, usually those players are the ones playing the Jeskai Ascendancy builds.
1 top, 1 bottom off the Scries. For Sam Black. Thinking about which land to start with. It's going to be a Watery Grave untapped, black to 18.
Can I just say that I'm kind of obsessed with Sam's Mad Scientist there?
It's nice. I like this aesthetic a lot. Speaking of Mad Scientist, thought Sky were targeting you because I know you scryed a card to the top. Also, just kind of works in the Sam's deck, but a nice play there.
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite things to do in the previous the previous Mulligan rule before the London Mulligan was to thought scour my opponent after they scryed to the top. I felt evil doing it, just pure evil.
It's so often.
It is always a land. It's always a land.
Here's an Arkham's Astrolabe for Burchett, and Polluted Delta is a land for turn. For black, it's going to be a Misty Rainforest go. Burchett will sacrifice the Delta end step.
Now, if Burchett goes and gets a breeding pool here, you got to assume an Oko's coming. If they go get a Hallowed Fountain, you got to assume there's a Monster Mentor coming.
Well, it's going to be Breeding Pool. This will be a check for that Oko.
Yeah, but something like Drowning the Lock here could answer it pretty cleanly. Force Negation, there's one main and one sideboard could answer it, as well as the one Deprive. Not a ton of answers for a turn 3 Oko when you're on the draw, though.
All right, we'll see if Burchett has a haymaker here. You do kind of want to cast must counters early and often to pressure decks like Mystic Sultai. Quick Misty Rainforest and a fetch for Burchett to 18 and to 16 off of Hallowed Fountain. Could be anything. Yeah,
life total not really under pressure here from Autumn, so making sure that they can cast all these potent sideboard cards. And a 3-mana spell is going to be Saheeli Sublime Artificer, yet another Planeswalker that Sam's going to need an answer for here. Not a whole lot of ways to actually destroy a Planeswalker when it's on the battlefield. Just 1 Abrupt Decay and 2 Assassin's Trophies, as well as a 3rd trophy in the sideboard.
Saheeli caught a Deprive last time. This time it looks like it is resolving. Burchett immediately follows up with Mishra's Bauble. Servo token on the way. That it looks like Black has some kind of interaction.
I think he does have the Assassin Trophy, and he's just killing it now before too many tokens are generated. The tokens going wide here are a great way for the Urza deck to win a fair game against this Mystic Sultai deck, because it kind of invalidates all of that spot removal, and Counterspell is no longer affected if you go pretty wide with these tokens.
This is one of those decks where sometimes you have every spell off the top rolled up, but you just lose to an early 1-1, you know?
Right.
Abrupt Decay takes care of Saheeli. Black shocked for that, so down to 17. I think that should be 15, right? Shocked for the Watery Grave?
Yeah, he's at 15.
Yeah. Burchett's going to use the Mishra's Bauble. Take a look at the top card of Black's deck.
that was an odd face. That must be a real good one off the top. Just like a, uh-oh. It's a surgical extraction.
Extraction.
That's not that big of a deal right now. Sam can handle the Psymaster Thopterus or the Saheelis, but Autumn has probably brought in Monster Mentor and Oko, which all kind of do the same thing at 3 different mana, and there's 2 copies of each throughout. So if I'm Sam, I'm not really looking to surgical either of these cards right now, though if Autumn has one in hand, this could be pretty good for him.
Typically, you see more size than Saheelis, so mathematically, you probably want to go for that one if you're going to fire it off.
More recently, it's been a pretty even split, 2s and 2s, especially in the iterations that play Emery, just because making a copy of Hasted Emery gets you some added value.
Sure. All right, so we're seeing Surgical in the draw step.
Oh, God, I hope he hit Bauble.
The target's Mishra's Bauble, and there are 2 more where that came from.
Oh, Sam is so smart. Oh, man.
Mind Rot's pretty good for the low cost of 2 life.
It also just makes, I don't know, just having more cheap artifacts makes those Planeswalkers, Saheelis, and Sais just that much better, you know?
Black shocking to 13 for the play. Well worth it. We see the hand left over. Arkham's Astrolabe, Mox Opal, Flooded Strand, and I believe Psymaster Thopterus is the 4th card. So there were a couple good hits off the Surgical. And a second Surgical, that was Psy. Past tense was Psy.
Yes.
It's gone now.
GG Psy.
Sam Black to 11.
Now Sam breathing a sigh of relief.
I see what you did.
Yeah, after getting that one. And now Autumn left with just basically an Arkham's Astrolabe in hand as any form of juice. Going to need to play that, draw a card, and hit something good. But they do have the ability to play the land and the Mox Opal, so if they hit a 4-drop, they can potentially play it this turn.
Sure. Couple looks at that with Astrolabe and the draw step. Well, I suppose the draw step has been resolved, so just 1 look from here.
Yeah, just the 1 look from the Astrolabe. And Sam does have 3 mana at the ready, so could potentially have some sort of counterspell or some answer to anything that could be brought off the top. We'll just have to wait and see.
So the Servo will attack Sam down to 10.
Wouldn't be surprised to see a fetch here from Autumn before casting the Astrolabe just to thin the deck a little bit. You're probably going to need the mana at some point. Might as well, because your life total is not really going to be in jeopardy.
Yep, there it is. Flooded Strand fetches to 15. Mystic Sanctuary. So Burchett going to set up the draw off of the Astrolabe. Serum Vision is going to the top of the library. Sam Black is playing 4 Snapcaster Mage in the deck. What do you think the odds of Snapcaster Surgical are here? Well, 0. Didn't happen. Here's Arkham's Astrolabe.
Well, to be fair, he could always Snapcaster Surgical to Saheeli's to shuffle away the Seer Visions.
Also true.
And get rid of Saheeli as a potential threat later on.
He did pay life over using this Watery Grave, so I assume there's some kind of plan for this 3 mana here.
I think maybe he's just going to snap Thought Scour. Doesn't feel the need to Surgical Extraction, something like Serum Visions. Definitely just wants to maybe hit a land drop or something. You never know.
Ether Spellbomb, the draw for Burchett. They will play that and draw a card immediately. Here's Mox Opal. Another spell, a Witching Well.
Why are you saying it that way?
Saying what way?
You bastard. All right, this Scry 2 from Witching Well is going to hopefully set up Autumn for the following turn, but we got to see what Sam's got going on. Here's
Pulse of Marasa for Misty Rainforest.
That's a nice one.
Gain 6 to 16.
Sam has taken a bunch of damage from his own mana this game, as well as a couple points from the servo, but Pulse of Marasa just completely undoes all that and helps him hit his land drop here. Misty Rainforest also able to go get Mystic Sanctuary, which can put Surgical Extraction or something else back on top. Even put the Pulse of Marasa back on top if he needs to buffer his life total a bit more.
Just go off.
I mean, that's the whole deck. Value Town.
Here's an attack with the servo. Black to 15. The land that Black played was Snow-Covered Island, not the Misty Rainforest that he showed. Seemingly long-term wants to use that to find a Sanctuary for a better card than what he has. Just draw a go outside of that attack for Burchett. Now Black will play Misty Rainforest as land number 5.
Now Burchett likely going to go to the well here and pop it and draw 2. Looking for some way to play multiple spells in the same turn. I would not be surprised in the coming weeks if a lot of these Urza Outcome decks actually adapt to these counter spells and just start playing 2+ Cavernous Souls in their deck. I think Cavernous Souls is a very underrated card and strategies that kind of revolve around resolving one really important creature.
I buy it.
I know Harlan Fear is already doing that since Artificers is the name, and can already name Goblin Engineer, and he's still playing the previous iteration of Urza.
Explosives on 1 for Black. You'll see Burchett use the Witching Well to draw 2 cards.
Why? Now you're just doing it to bug me. I know it.
That's not the only reason I'm doing it.
Sure. But it is a reason you're doing it.
I would consider that upside. Polluted Delta, land number 5 for Burchett.
Does have an Oko in hand. This one could pose some problems for Sam if he doesn't have the answer right away. Autumn here actually choosing to tap the Mox Opal in the face of the Engineer Explosives. I would have liked to have seen a target of the Mox Opal instead with the Oko, or at least threatening it, so you can start attacking for 4 turns instead of just 3.
Sure. So here is an attempt at Oko. Black will fetch up Mystic Sanctuary. Go into 14. So this is Cryptic Command mana, and put one of these cards on top of my deck.
He might just not choose to put anything on top. These cards on top in his graveyard are not all that impactful right now. Surgical Extraction helps ultimately eliminate some threats, but I'm not really sure if he's worried about any of the things that are currently in the graveyard from Autumn.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I was just looking. He plays a lot of fetch lands and only so many fetchables. So, you know, sometimes you would get Sanctuary and not get anything. He will put the Pulse of Marasa back on top.
It looks like Autumn did bring in Disdainful Stroke to help fight over those Cryptic Commands. Now Oko going to start ticking up here, probably making things into Elks. I wonder if Autumn starts with targeting the servo to just add a little pressure without exposing themselves too much to the Engineer Explosives.
First things first, Burchett will fetch to 14 for another Snow-Covered Island. Ooh, and here is Emery, Lurker of the Lock.
That's a pretty good one here. This is a great turn from Autumn, being able to not only resolve an Oko, but using Deceitful Stroke on a Cryptic Command to prevent a bit of velocity from Sam, and resolving an Emery. So Sam's got a lot of stuff to deal with on the following turn.
And you're seeing some good dividends from this diverse 3-mana threat package in Burchett's sideboard. This was a game where Surgical Extraction was very impactful on their hand, but there was still a lot left over in the deck, as you see here.
Right, and this is one of the reasons why Surgical Extraction is usually a little weak against decks with a bunch of differing threats. And one of the reasons why these Urza Outcome decks are so powerful, because against the fair matchups, you're able to just attack them from a variety of angles.
Servo became Elk, attacked Sam for 3. Back on his turn, he will Pulse of Marasta for Misty Rainforest back. So -3 on the attack, +6 on the pulse, showing 17 on the screen. Uses Misty Rainforest to 16. Finds another Mystic Sanctuary.
My guess, probably going to put the Cryptic Command back on top and has something to be able to kill this Emery or the Oko, but probably the Emery.
Standard classic players, that is time in round number 2.
Choosing not to put anything on top.
Yeah, it's just an untapped land. He's going to opt and draw. Oh, this was a trigger on the stack. So
Sure.
Abrupt Decay going on top after opting. So here's Fatal Push on Emery, and now we know the top card of the deck is Abrupt Decay.
Okay. So now I expect Autumn to plus the Oko on the Mox Opal, swing for 6, because the Explosives is going to be able to blow up any Astrolabes that become 3/3s, because they do maintain the casting cost.
Right.
Oh. Autumn just separated 4 lands from the rest. I'm curious what they drew for the turn.
Probably not a bad one. Here's an attack for 6, as you mentioned. Opal becomes Elk.
It's got to be Urza. There it is.
Urza it is.
Now Sam in a world of hurt with just Abrupt Decay on top to deal with the Oko, looking at lethal from the rest of the attackers.
So Construct and Urza show up. Black draws that Abrupt Decay. Looks like the other card in hand is Into the Story. That's a nice 4-for-1. However, he's a little light on mana to convert beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, draw 4 doesn't really get him out of it, as far as I can tell. I mean, if he draws untapped Black Source and a Fatal Push off the draw 4, you can Abrupt Decay and Fatal Push the Construct token and an Elk to stay alive. Burchett also, I guess, has to use the Oko on an Astrolabe to threaten lethal, so maybe Abrupt Decay plus Explosives can prevent lethal, but Sam's still in a world of hurt and unable to cast the Into the Story if that's the case.
So here is a tap for 4 Into the Story. Black kind of laughing about it.
Yeah, I mean, normally this would be very good, but Oko has just produced a lot of threat diversity here, not only creating a bunch of 3/3s, but threatening to continue to make 3/3s even if Sam's able to kill it.
You see him surveying the battlefield. What is my best chance of clawing out of this position? His deck is really good at stopping the opponent from pulling ahead, but not nearly as good as clawing back from behind. And he found himself in a position where he did not do enough to stop Burchett from getting set up.
I don't know that he's 100% dead. Or at the very least, he's going to posture like he's not.
And Misty Rainforest go. So Burchett knows about that Explosives on 1 on the table and Abrupt Decay in hand. Yeah. Black did not posture for long. Burchett pretty easily closes that game if things are tied up. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what we saw from Surgical Extraction in this matchup. We saw what looked like at the time very impactful Surgical Extractions, actually taking 3 cards out of Burchett's hand off of 2 Surgical Extractions.
Yep.
And also just some of the win conditions from the deck. But ultimately, it looked like this package that Burchett has of multiple 3-mana Haymakers, also having Urza, Paradoxical Outcome in the deck. There's just too much stuff to really Surgical too effectively. Do you think Black still wants to be on these?
the way that his deck operates, I think he's trying to systematically dismantle all of the potential ways for Autumn to get back into the game. So I don't dislike it. I think he needs to basically pick and choose his spots on the surgical extractions and try to take the things that are going to be most impactful at any given time, or the things that are most likely in hand. I mean, in that game, 2 surgical extractions cost him 4 life and stole 3 cards from Autumn's hand and took away some potential win conditions out of the deck. That's a fine card, but it wasn't enough to get the job done because Autumn just had a Witching Well into Oko with a counterspell. And the Witching Well was a thing that allowed Autumn to basically get a burst of cards to allow the 1-2 punch of Oko plus Disdainful Stroke for protection. And even though the Autumn was like pretty low on resources that one turn, able to claw back into the game because of it.
Over on StarCityGames.com, we have a sale going because we always have a sale going. It is our Magic the Gathering sale. You get hundreds of singles on sale every week. It goes Monday to Monday, varying what is on sale. Taking a look at some Commander cards here. I'm trying to figure out the theme that Vandal Blast is throwing me.
Cool uncommons and foil mythics. That's the one. That's the sale.
Yeah, Tracks of Praetor's Voice and Command Tower, both pretty big Commander cards. You can learn more about this at go.starcitygames.com/sale. See what we have on sale. Pick up your copies of these cards.
I'd be surprised if this was just a Commander sale. Like, Vandal Blast seems like it's okay as a Commander card.
Yeah.
Because the Overload does kill all opposing artifacts from all opponents, not just
they just let you play
opponent.
Soul Ring, so it'll be something you want to blow up.
Yeah, I mean, every deck has Soul Ring.
Yeah.
Most decks have Mana Crypt.
Treasure tokens actually pretty prominent in Commander.
Trader tokens?
Treasure tokens.
Treasure tokens,
Yeah.
sure. All right.
There's this card, it's like a 2-mana goblin that you make a treasure for every artifact and enchantment your opponents control.
Oh, wow. I was going to say Wily Goblin, but that's way better.
No. It's like 100 Wily Goblins stapled together.
That doesn't seem like a real card. That seems like a fake card they made in a random set.
Well, yeah, it is a fake card. It's from one of those Commander precons.
Yeah.
So Covered Island Go for Sam Black.
Would not be surprised to see a Thought Scour here from Sam EOT just to kind of utilize his mana as well as potentially turn on Drown and Lock and into the story.
A few more spells for Burchett. Mishra's Bauble, Mox Opal, Snow Covered Island, and here is Emery, Lurker of the Lock. There it is, Dockside Extortionist. You won't see this one in Modern, but it's real nice in Commander.
All right. Now, Sam does have Drown the Lock, so he does have an answer here for the Emery. But that'll leave him vulnerable on turn 2 if Autumn has a powerful 3-drop and another artifact to play.
Emery mills over Witching Well and Arkham's Astrolabe. End step, you see Sam Black going for Thought Scour and Rest in Peace milled over.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're Sam, you're very happy to see that Rest in Peace go bye-bye.
Shock for Watery Grave for Sam to 18. Drown in the Lock, targeting Emery. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Emery's of the Lock.
I'm mad about that.
That should be illegal.
I'm actually mad about that.
Get the flavor judge on here.
Yeah. That's her home. You can't drown in your home. You can't drown a merfolk.
Yeah.
The merfolk's the one in the picture doing the drowning.
Feels like we forgot the lessons we learned from Walk the Plank. Draw step, Surgical Extraction for Black, going to 17. Targeting Emery. No Emerys in the hand. We see Urza, Paradoxical Outcome, Serum Visions, Mox Opal, and Saheeli.
I like this one. Guess what? Sam's leaving the Emery in the graveyard because there's no way for Autumn to really get it back from the graveyard, and total number of cards in graveyard does matter for Sam's strat. So he's able to use Surgical Extraction to get the ones out of the deck, leaves the one in the graveyard though.
That is nice.
Guess how many cards are in the graveyard right now?
I don't have to guess. I can count.
7. Guess how many cards you need for Into the Story to work.
Again, I don't need to guess. It's on the card, but it's 7.
Yeah. That's synergy. Synergy right there.
Really, really good math.
Yeah.
A combination of addition and reading.
I'm the math guy.
Standardized testing really paying off here.
Duh.
Serum Visions for Burchett. Draw and a Scry 2.
The hand for Burchett there was not very good. As far as I could tell, no second land, a redundant Mox Opal, was maybe relying a little hard on the Emery to do some heavy lifting, but rest in peace in the hand. If Autumn's able to draw another mana source, could be problematic for Sam. Really needs his graveyard for Mystic Sanctuary to work. Could potentially blow it up with something like Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy, but that sets him pretty far behind.
Yeah, scry 2 to the bottom for Burchett. No second land. They will use the Mishra's Bauble to take a look at the top card of Black's deck and then draw 2. There's a land.
Yeah, pair of lands here for Autumn.
One of them was a Mystic Sanctuary that's going to enter tapped here. And to pass back.
Sam found Field of the Dead, a potential win condition for later in the game. You'll notice the snow-covered island as well as the basic island in play for Sam. That's a little trick that a lot of players are doing in various strategies alongside Field of the Dead, because they do technically have different names.
Mystic Sanctuary, land number 4 for Black, puts the Drown in the Lock right back on top. 4 mana online, well before Burchett has it. Things looking real good for Sam Black here.
Yeah, Autumn may need to find a way to set up a turn where they can play Saheeli and a Rest in Peace in the same turn. Because if Autumn just goes for a Rest in Peace here or just a Saheeli here, it's going to probably work out poorly. Sam's hand has probably got a counterspell or 2 at the ready, if I had to guess.
Flood Strand is land number 3 for Burchett. 19, we'll see if the life total becomes 17. Just blue mana so far, so I would expect a shock.
Yeah, I would as well.
And it's Hollowed Fountain, Burchett to 17.
Autumn going to try to shut down Sam's strategy with a Rest in Peace here, I would guess. Now, they do have the option to play Saheeli into a second Mox Opal. That doesn't quite turn on the Opals, but it's pretty close.
The attempt will be Rest in Peace. Ooh, that works. Graveyard's exiled.
Huh. And Sam put a Drown on the Lock on top of the deck, so that's kind of turned off right now.
Wonder if the hand is just otherwise devoid of counterspells. Could have a long-term plan to destroy the Rest in Peace? I don't know. Not clear.
It isn't clear. It's also possible that Sam didn't know about the Rest in Peace. It might have been the card drawn the turn after the Surgical Extraction. I just missed it personally.
It was throwing out the Serum Visions, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so Burchett at the ready with land number 4. We'll see if there's another attempt at a Haymaker. There will be. Urza Lord High Artificer. Drown in the Lock, no longer good here, as the graveyards have been exiled.
Yeah, this is real bad news for Sam. I believe he does have Fatal Push in hand, but that Drown in the Lock is effectively a dead card. Only really works against tokens.
Yeah, takes care of the construct anyway. Land number 6 for Black will be Polluted Delta.
Yeah, but he is able to get a 6th land name and turn on Revolt for Fatal Push. So he's going to be able to take care of the Urza and also gets green mana for a potential future way to deal with the Rest in Peace via Assassin's Trophy or Abrupt Decay.
Sure.
But he knows about the Saheeli from Autumn, and that's probably going to come down next turn and start posing some problems. And Sam's going to have to rely pretty heavily on Field of the Dead to check the Saheeli.
So Fatal Push does take care of the Urza. As you mentioned, green mana was found. Breeding Pool entered tapped.
I think they're just confirming life totals because Sam's done some fetching and shocking and stuff.
Yeah.
Make sure to get those clarified here for you.
I believe we do have Sam Black 15 to Autumn Burchett 17. See if that ends up changing. Yeah, that is correct.
All right, Master Thoughtless off the top for Autumn, but they already had Saheeli. Now, the 1-2 punch of Saheeli and Sai might be a little too much for Sam to overcome with just Field of the Dead. 2 lands in hand. Not a whole lot going on otherwise.
Polluted Delta, land number 5. Burchett fetches to 16.
Yeah, Sam's deck very reliant not only on his own graveyard for Mystic Sanctuary, but his opponent's graveyard for cards like Drown in the Lock and Into the Story. Has 7 mana. Into the story, not too bad at the moment, just because of draw 4 is a big burst of cards that you might need. The fetch land that he has in hand also gets to create 2 zombies with Field of the Dead, which is nice.
Burchett to 14 off of Breeding Pool. Here's a tap of 3 for Master Thopterist. It is really funny. You see Burchett here. Rest in Peace was a follow-up to Emery Lurker of the Lock, trying to play out of their own graveyard.
Right.
And it just shows, you know, they've identified. I think Rest in Peace is lights out against Sam's deck in a lot of situations.
It is very strong.
It's looking real nice.
It's also funny how much better it is than something like Leyline of the Void as well, because it exiles your own graveyard.
Right. So here is a redundant Mox Opal. It makes a Thopter.
Yeah, that Thopter is going to get sacrificed, though, to draw a card. And then the new Mox Opal is going to be able to stick around. Heads up interaction there from Autumn. Nice play.
Yep, so you see exactly that and a pass.
Wow, off the top, Sam Black finds another Fatal Push. Going to be able to make 2 zombies this turn and deal with the side before it gets out of control. And now it's going to be zombies versus servos for the foreseeable future.
Fetch to 14. As you mentioned, we're going to see a Revolted Fatal Push and 2 zombies. Sunken Hollow found. The Mystic Sanctuary is not really good here. Want to sit on those in case he could maybe destroy the Rest in Peace later.
For sure.
So side down, we'll go back to Burchett.
Now, the zombies also play a vital role in actually being able to pressure the Saheeli, so I cannot stress how important that Fatal Push was against the Master Thopterist, because now it's going to be a grind. Autumn's going to try to put up some resistance here with Saheeli and maybe a couple of artifacts, and perhaps even something like Paradox Outcome can generate a lot of servos, but Sam can basically make another 2-2 every turn, and it's going to be 2-2s v 1-1s. And without Urza Lord High Artificer, the Paradox Outcomes are pretty good, but they're not backbreaking in any way.
So here's Saheeli, Mox Amber, makes a servo. Now there's 4 mana at the ready. The Opal and the Amber both turned on. And here's Paradoxical Outcome.
I wouldn't be surprised if Autumn actually targets the Rest in Peace as well, just because the extra card is going to be pretty good. And both graveyards are really small right now.
Yeah, and you see that. Pick up 2 Moxen and a Rest in Peace. Draw 3.
That extra card could be huge here. Found a Mishra's Bauble as well, so Autumn can actually generate at least 3 more servos this turn by just going Mox, Mox, Bauble.
And also just picking up 2 Moxen, you know you can just cast Rest in Peace right away.
Right. It does leave it a little vulnerable to a counterspell for 1 turn, but I think Autumn willing to make that gamble just to get that extra card, and I like the play. It's aggressive, but it's playing to win the long game as opposed to winning in the short term.
It also just seems extremely likely that one of the other spells would have been countered if there was a counterspell, right?
Right. Saheeli would have been countered for sure.
All right, so the Moxen are back. A couple more servos, and Rest in Peace is back as well. Burchett up to 5 servos. Mishra's Bauble, make it 6.
It's a lot of calling round trees.
Servo becomes Mishra's Bauble. Burchett's going to use that to take a look at the top of a library. So it looks like a look at the top card of their own library. Makes sense with the uncracked Flooded Strand.
All right, getting to draw a card off the copied Mishra's Bauble here. Going to be able to potentially even pop 2 more baubles. Get some juice flowing.
Zombies come at Saheeli. They're both double blocked. Sam Black will play Mystic Sanctuary. Not the kind of value you're used to off the card, just a zombie token made off of it. And passes to Burchett. Just 1 card left in hand for Black. See a fetch end step for Burchett. Down to 13. Finds a snow-covered island.
That was a clock check from Autumn. How much time we got? I feel like Autumn knows that they're very likely to win this game from this spot, but the question is, how long is it going to take? This Urza deck is just mechanically taxing as far as how many actual actions you have to take, each turn in order to actually win the game. Autumn doing a quick graveyard check. I feel like Autumn's going to try to win the game via Urza and the token.
You saw the bobble used to look at the top card of Sam's deck. And now Urza put on the stack. And Sam Black's seen enough. No thank you.
Yeah, that Rest in Peace was brutal. Those Mystic Sanctuaries would have been real spells through the whole match. Unfortunately for Sam, though, that Rest in Peace was just a little too much for his deck to handle.